I would like to bring the Tuesday, December 17th, regular planning board meeting to order. Per Mass General Law, it is being recorded and videotaped, recorded and going out live. So first up, our administrative items. First is 203 Mouse Mill Road, file number 24-026 SPA-Major. Close the public hearing and release the consultant review balances and interest after all invoices are paid.
You want a motion?
Please.
I move to close the public hearing for the proposed site plan at 203 Mouse Mill Road.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pass down the decision for everyone to sign.
So are we supposed to sign these now?
Yes.
This is for Mouse Mill Road?
Yep.
Okay, while we're doing that, we have an A&R, approval not required for the Westport Land Conservation Trust, file number 24-041A, request by the applicant for endorsement of a two-lot plan subject to conservation easement lot 2 to be conveyed to a butter, 0 Adamsville Road, assessors map 79, lot 1.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Donald Medeiros, professional engineer, professional land surveyor with Able Engineering in Little Compton. We prepared this Form A for the Westport Land Conservation Trust. We've done in accordance with a proper survey. We've done the research, we've run the field survey, we've set monuments, and we've prepared this plan suitable for recording with the Registry of Deeds. Basically, lot 1 is 23.5 acres. That's the eastern majority of the property. That will be purchased by the Westport Land Conservation Trust. And lot 2, which is 1.9 acres on the western side of the property, which bounds up against the state line, is planned to be conveyed to the abutter in Tiverton. There's not a whole lot that I could say other than the plan is before you. Happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, just to be clear, lot 2 has no frontage anywhere, right?
That is correct.
And lot 1 will be used for conservation, has no frontage anywhere,
That's correct.
okay? Michael, you suggest?
The plan appropriately indicates that endorsement by the planning board does not constitute conformance to the Westport zoning bylaws, nor assure that the lot is herein buildable, and I'd recommend endorsement.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments?
What is this area that's designated overlap? Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yes, there's a plan recorded in the Registry of Deeds of an abutting parcel, and we believe that plan does in fact overlap the property we're surveying as shown. So that is a survey that's on record. It was done approximately 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. We've been in touch with that survey company that prepared that plan. They're aware that we disagree with their findings, and they're basically standing by for us to provide them with this information with the expectation that they're going to put a corrective plan on record at the registry.
Which would take that out of and no longer be under a separate, another ownership.
Well, it's not under, it's just erroneous. There's no, that plan doesn't convey or establish ownership. It's just it's an erroneous survey. They basically have the property in the wrong place. But it does exist. It's a plan on record. So we're obligated to show it. And we clearly show that we didn't honor that plan and we don't believe it's correct. And as I said, we have been in touch with that survey company, and you know, in terms of conversation between surveyor and surveyor, they've acquiesced to the fact that they are going to put a corrective plan on record. We just did not want to, well, actually, my client did not want to wait and hold up their purchase of the property pending when this other company would get around to preparing a corrective plan.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, just for my curiosity, when they do, they come in for an A&R?
No, that was just a perimeter survey.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So they will just put a corrective plan on record at the registry. They will not need planning board approval
All
to
right.
do that, or A&R approval.
Okay, anybody else?
One motion, Mr.
Please.
I move to approve the endorsement of the plan entitled Approval Not Required Subdivision Prepared for Westport Land Conservation Trust, Inc., map 79, lot 1, Westport, Massachusetts, because the plan complies with the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81B.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There's none. Thank you.
Thank you.
And when do we sign that?
The Mylar will be signed tonight, so, because I won't be here tomorrow, so, but it'll be available for pickup tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. The next scheduled thing is 6:15, which it is not 6:15, so planners report?
It's quick. Last night, Jim and I went to, the chairman went to the select board meeting to request that the planning board short-term rental and accessory dwelling unit bylaw amendments are returned back to the planning board to open a public hearing on January 14th at 6:30. And they unanimously voted to return or to allow the planning board to open the public hearing.
Okay, and that public hearing is
January 14th, 6:30.
6:30 for both. That's it?
That's all.
Okay. Minutes of November 19th. Executive session. I don't think that we can do that in open meeting yet. November 19th, regular session. So, do we have a motion for the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes of the November 19th meeting. That does not include the executive session.
I second that.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
And one abstention. Okay, we have a few minutes. Yeah.
Hold on a second. I can't make that motion. I wasn't here, actually. Sorry. I didn't see any errors because I wasn't here.
I move
But
that
I shouldn't move it.
Okay, so we'll scratch that, so,
I will move the adoption of the minutes of November 19th.
and Mark, will you second that?
I do, I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
I abstain.
and two abstentions and one, and three approvals. Okay,
Listed as present anyway.
we have a couple of minutes, if there's matters not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours. They're not here?
Not yet. I don't know if they're coming or not.
Where's the public hearing, by the way, on the short-term rentals? Is that going to be here?
It'll be here.
Okay.
Well, we got about 2 minutes.
Are we still good to go on our assistant planner?
Yep.
Good.
She's starting January 2nd. She's moved to the area and she's ready to go.
Well, that is super.
Well, I'll take up time by saying I'm the planning board's representative on the offshore wind committee, and I will note that the chair of the offshore wind committee is in the audience here. We had a boisterous meeting last Thursday, and he did an excellent job with standing room only in the selectmen's meeting room. And it was, he invited one or two members of state government, but for some reason, half of state government showed up. I don't know whether that has anything to do with who our state senator is or not, but it was really useful, actually, to have them come and explain what the role of different state agencies is in reviewing offshore wind, should there be a proposal to run a power line across Horseneck Beach, under the river, along Route 88, what they would do and what resources might be made available to the town of Westport to review such a project. And I think it was a very good use of time, and certainly grateful to the state agencies that came down to inform us about that.
So maybe you could edify my ignorance here. So if that were to happen, I think Conservation surely has a Conservation Commission has a role in approving whatever they do, because it would have to go through some wetlands and stuff, even though it's on state property. But would the planning board, because it's, would the planning board have any role vis-a-vis site plan review?
Well, I think, and Jake can talk about this, I think it's mostly the state, but on this. But they did say they were very open to local input on what our view was. The point I wanted to make was these are inherently large projects and inherently very complex projects. And we needed resources, whether through the Conservation Commission or any other department, to hire technical people accountable to us, not to the developer, not to the state, to help us understand environmental impacts, economic impacts, social impacts, all the impacts that you might imagine. And Undersecretary Judge said that they have a fund, and what seems clear is that other than Barnstable, we are one of the first communities to be looking at this, and therefore one of the first communities that might be applying to this fund. And while he said, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jake, that the cap on this fund might be $150,000, he said that the amount of the fund is considerably more than that, and that a town could get more than the $150,000 for use for technical assistance. So I think that as soon as there is an inclination that that is a possibility, and we don't know that yet, but as soon as there's an inclination that that's a possibility, I would think that Chris Capone, Michael Burris, Jim Hartnett ought to be figuring out, with our state senator's support, how do we lighten up that pot that Undersecretary Judge has control over, so that we can start to see how can we have in the town of Westport access to technical expertise that is helping us out in evaluating that. Do you want to comment any more on that, Jay? Because clearly it's the Conservation Commission that's in the driver's seat, I think, in terms of the town of Westport.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Vice Chair. I know we're filling up some time here, but as the chair of the Offshore Wind Committee, John gave a pretty good synopsis of our meeting. I think the concern that, not concern, first and foremost, Westport is one of the first communities, local communities, to actually develop what you would call an offshore wind advisory committee that we've seen almost nationwide. So I think we're kind of ahead of the game with respect to that, because I think the goal of it from the select board and from everyone else involved was to make sure that the town has a voice in this, from the get-go, as opposed to seeing other towns realizing whether they didn't like the community host agreement and then after the fact trying to make changes to that. So that I think is very important to the town to have that in place. The one concern that I did see out of that is Governor Healy on, I think it was November 21st, signed a new piece of legislation that made its way through the legislature that essentially streamlines and makes more efficient the process with respect to permitting and licensing of these projects throughout the Commonwealth. The concern you see there is it does take away a little bit of local control over that, and seeing as if there is a proposal on the table for state property landing and going up essentially a state easement, that does take away some of the concerns with that. So what they're trying to do with the piece of legislation is avoid stonewalling and making it a years. They've seen some projects take 2 to 5 years. So the legislation essentially says that a lot of this permitting and licensing process falls within a 15-month window. The concern I have is they have basically 15 months from now to draft regulations. So it'll be a public comment period and regulations as to how they're going to implement this piece of legislation that the governor signed. So the question is, if there is a project, does it happen prior to this 15th month window, because that's where the funding would sit. That was in that Clean Green Energy Act that the governor signed. So, long story short, there's a lot of moving pieces in whether that permitting process is and where we can get access to those funds is even in place before something comes before us. That that would be the concern. We're going to continue to go down the path. Like I said, John said the first step was to bring the state in. With Senator Roderick's help, we had obviously a great turnout of state officials. And really, they don't have anything in front of them right now. So there was nothing for them to comment on with respect to Westport and a project in Westport. That obviously can change at any point in the future. So that's essentially kind of where we're at. We have another meeting scheduled for January 16th. We're going to try to see if we can get representatives from Vineyard Wind to attend to give us even a more specific, if they can, what they're looking at with respect to the project that has had public hearings at the high school and has gone through the federal BOEM process up to this point. So that's kind of where we're at. We're going to continue on, and hopefully we can get a little more clarity as if there is a project, where it goes. And the other concern that I think a lot of people have voiced is, assuming Vineyard Wind goes forward with their licensing and permitting for this project, let's assume they don't use Westport, do they have the ability to or opportunity to sell that off or give that to another company? I mean, there's so many out there. There's 7 or 8 different companies that are out there. So we need to be careful as to protecting Westport's interests. Even if Vineyard Wind says they may not, but they continue down that road, can that be something that can be used for someone else? So a lot of moving parts. We've got a great committee. Got to kind of keep everyone on task, but I think the charter that we have in place will be helpful for Westport, and to hopefully formulate an opinion that protects both Westport and the residents here.
So is there any way to preemptively get some of this money and do some of the research on what the impacts would be, which could be transferable to other places, but if they use Westport as a what if, wouldn't it be better to have that information for everybody beforehand, so we know what we're talking about?
I agree with respect to that. The question is, I'm not entirely sure Vineyard Wind has looked specifically at the project per se as to how much work would go into it. I mean, in my rational mind, you're running up 13 miles, essentially 11 to 13 miles of 88. They haven't done soil samples. They haven't done analysis. There was really nothing with respect to that, minus getting under or over or whatever their plan is at the Westport River. So my fear is that we don't have project specifics, right? They essentially have 2 landing points, New London and Westport, and they drew it with a Sharpie, in my opinion, and haven't put a lot of engineering or foresight into how that's going to occur. So the concern is, would we be wasting money either from the state or from the town to look at something that we're not sure what we're looking at? Amongst the Conservation Commission, we look and say, okay, you go up 88, you probably have 3 to 4 at the least perennial streams that you're either going to have to go under. That would fall under, you would hope that would fall under the Conservation Commission, ignoring the issue with the river. So we're thinking, if this project becomes further down and comes to some sort of fruition, we could always use, as the Conservation Commission does, wetlands funds to do at least maybe some engineering, some studying on behalf of at least conservation. I'm pretty confident, I'm sure the town, obviously through Chairman Rodericks with Ways and Means, could probably help with respect to getting something to at least protect our interests with respect to that.
So, but what I would more think about is the landing from the ocean to Westport and going underneath the river or on the bottom of the river to cross the river. Those kind of things are not so site-specific that, you're not talking about with regard to going up 88. They told me that they would dig up 88
And place
Put
it
it-
down the middle.
no, just
Oh.
put it on one side,
Yeah.
right up along the edge. And rip it up and repave it, instead of trying to go through the woods.
Correct, and that, you know, we're thinking logically here from a construction standpoint. You have points where you could get down with Main Road and Drift Road, you close down 88, you rip it up, you retar it, and you're all set. I think the concern that we voiced, not only John, myself, Rick Smith, who's the Shellfish Commissioner, is the concern of crossing Westport River.
Right.
What does that do with respect to species, impact on that? Because they can talk about having data, and we pointed that out. They say, well, we have data about fish movement and fish migration, but that's in a situation where it's in the ocean and they have other opportunities to go around it.
Right.
You create essentially a fence on that Westport River, and if there's very little data telling us what could happen north of that bridge, that really has to be a concern because of what Westport depends on both economically from fishing as well as tourism and recreational
Right.
fishing. So, in essentially, and John can correct me on this, they don't really have data on that. They were going to look to see if they could find data on that, but I think that is probably first and foremost the biggest issue that would face Westport is how would that cable, whether we're dealing with electromagnetic, whether we're dealing with the heating. There are discussions and data out there that says that those cables do heat, and that's a concern from a conservation standpoint. You put that under a perennial, stream, and it gives off heat. You're drying up the obviously the water table. So I think my concern is that I don't believe that the data that would support a project that we're looking at in Westport exists currently. And that would be a situation where we'd probably need an expert to provide
Of course.
information with respect to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, it is now past 6:15, so next up is Burke's V-twin or 5-twin? V. File number 24-017 SBA-MAJ, continued from July 16th, 2024, August 13th, September 10th, and October 15th. The applicant is seeking a major modification for an approved site plan to construct a garage for a motorcycle restoration shop.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant is not present. He has requested a continuance to January 28th at 6:45. He did submit revised plans and an existing conditions plan on Monday. We haven't had the opportunity to review those nor send it out to the consulting engineer. The applicant is also considering withdrawing this application and scaling it down due to the expense of installing a stormwater system.
When do you want the continuance?
January 28th at 6:45.
So
Correct,
I'd like a
Nadine,
motion.
that 6:45 is open? 6:30?
Do
Okay,
you want a motion, Mr.
yes, I do.
Mr. Chair, I move that we continue the public hearing on Burke's v. Twin 24017 SPA-MAJ to 12825 at 6:30.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up is the 6:30 public hearing for Rosewood Lane. The applicant, file number 23-039C-MOD. The applicant is requesting a waiver from the rules and regulations to waive the as-built plan requirements to show the location of gas installation for 2 lots.
All right. Good evening, board members. My name is Emmanuel Pacheco Jr. I'm here today representing Emmanuel Pacheco Sr. of 26 Andrea Court in Westport in regards to the definitive subdivision plan that was approved by the planning board in February 20th of 2024. As part of our subdivision, we had initially designed the project to include the installation of underground utilities along the shoulder of the Royal Road. As required by our project plans, we then made contact with Liberty Utilities to arrange for the installation of the gas main along the railroad. However, at the time, and after much back and forth, the gas company had informed us that they will only install the gas lines for the lots through 2 separate laterals and only when the homes are constructed. I tried many times to explain our situation to them and the need to install the gas main along the road before we could build anything, but was still denied. I then reached out to the town planner to have him discuss the issue with Liberty Utilities, but Michael was also told that the homes would need to be constructed first. Therefore, due to the circumstances beyond our control and at further expense to us, we're here tonight before the board to request a waiver to eliminate the requirement of installing the gas main or gas lines as part of the subdivision process in order to move forward with the project. We believe that a waiver is justified for the project due to the circumstances and for the reasons outlined in our submitted narrative. In addition, the subdivision rules and regulations also state that the planning board may waive this requirement for 2-lot subdivision, and further mentions that underground utilities are not required for 2 lots or less. We hope that granting this waiver will allow us to move forward with our project and to allow the 2 future homes the flexibility of selecting alternative heating options without requiring the additional expense or mandate of installing a gas line as part of this project. Thank you for your time, and let me know if there's any questions.
So the gas line is in the street, right?
The gas main is right along Gifford Road, correct?
Right, but there's no connection for your stub? There's no stub for you?
I'm not sure if there's a stub available yet. I don't think I'm not sure if there's a stub.
Michael?
So the requested waivers from subdivision bylaw section 3G to waive the requirement that installed gas utility line is shown on the as-built plan. I'd recommend approval of it, provided the planning board finds, and I myself find that the waiver request is not inconsistent with the subdivision control law. Also, the board has to find that allowing the gas line to be added to the as-built following final gas line inspection is not detrimental to the public interest. I do have some sample conditions of approval, but I think the board should at least consider these 2 aspects.
So if they do install it, are they gonna come back with an as-built that shows where they are?
If gas is installed, I would recommend that the as-built is updated when they receive a final inspection, gas line inspection from the building department.
Anybody have any comments, questions?
And Jim, the main's on that side of the road,
Yeah.
and they won't tap it until the houses are up. And we did just pave it, but it's off the pavement,
Mhm.
so, and I think Mr. Pacheco would prefer to have it done now, but they won't do it, so.
Exactly.
Kind of, I would, certainly think we should make a motion to do this.
Okay, with the requirement that if they do install it, they redo the as-built?
Would there also be an option of maybe not updating the as-built if they decided to go with electric heat for the homes rather than using gas?
Well, it's hard to put an as-built with a gas line when you don't have one.
Well, exactly, yeah.
So-
So I was wondering about the requirement of having to update the as-built if there's no gas line in the future.
I think the as-bilt's supposed to show the utilities, so
Mhm.
if you don't have that utility, then it doesn't have to be there.
I mean, they could have oil heat or electric heat or another source.
Right. So are you having underground electric or not?
Yeah, we're still following through with that. 'Cause
So that's
They were
gonna,
actually able to install it, so that's good.
that's installed, and that'll be.
That's gonna be the next thing installed. That should be in the coming weeks, that'll be installed.
Right.
The
and
pole has
that-
already been changed.
Okay, so that's gonna be on the as-built.
That'll definitely be on the as-built,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that this even needs a waiver, but I move that we grant the waiver to, not to show the gas lines that don't exist.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we've got 10 minutes to use up, so.
Can we get a motion to close that public hearing too?
On Rosewood?
Yeah.
Is that a public thing? I move that we close the public hearing on Rosewood Lane.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So while we're using up 10 minutes, are there any other matters not reasonably anticipated within the 48 hours? I guess not.
Can you, to short-term rentals, we have the public hearing, would you say, on the 16th?
Mm-hmm.
What's the step, what goes on after that, Michael?
After that, the planning board would make a recommendation for, well, you'll have the public hearing, you'll determine what kind of language you would like to be in the zoning amendment. If the board is satisfied with what has been presented at the meeting, then we'll forward it back to the select board and for consideration to be placed on the warrant for town meeting in 2025. Otherwise, we can have several continuances.
So if
Town-
at the public hearing, everyone says you guys did a great job and there are no changes, then we report that to the select board and it would go on the town meeting warrant.
That's,
If some people say, why don't you make these changes, then we take that up at the next planning board meeting, consider whether to make those changes, and then take that amended short-term rental to the select board, saying we've had a public hearing, we've made the changes based on the public hearing, here's what we suggest you take to town meeting, and that completes that process, and then the select
Right.
board decides whether they want to take that amended part to town meeting.
mhm, yeah. And the planning board can amend the bylaw language in the same meeting. You don't necessarily have to continue it, so.
You
it's
mean
something-
at the
At the end of the public
At your
hearing.
public hearing.
At the public,
Yeah, we don't have to, if they're,
that can be the same meeting.
right.
So it's really just two steps, the public hearing, and then the select board, and then three steps, and then the town meeting.
But then there's also the town bylaw part of this, which is allowing the select board to regulate this business so that they would accept permit applications and grant permits, mostly on mass. And I think Roger Menard has spoken with you, Jeff, about this?
Yes.
There's been some concern at the town administrator's level that the select board doesn't have the authority to do this. But I think that it should be the same as regulating used car lots or,
Used car lots, they have statutory authority, but here, I think under chapter 21, 42nd 21, they have the authority to regulate things like this. In fact, most often, we recommend that there be a general bylaw enforced by the select board, and then, of course, a zoning bylaw for these short-term rentals. So
right.
this isn't something that Westport is doing alone. It's not unique to you. There are an awful lot of them out there that are regulating it just like this.
Okay. And as Because our zoning bylaw is pretty short and sweet. I mean, and are other communities going that route, or are they putting all kinds of?
I've seen it run together.
Yeah.
I've seen where it's been very short and sweet, and I've seen it where it's been 3, 4, 5 pages.
Okay. So, and just for the public, the selectmen's choice to whether or not to put the town bylaw on the town meeting warrant does not have a public hearing. Of course, they could have an open meeting anyway, but they're not required to have a public hearing. But I think it'll be discussed in our public hearing, I would think, so, but not to the same extent. Two minutes.
Jim, in the back of our binder, there's this Kayla's Way. Is that, I don't see that on the agenda, is that something?
That's, Michael put that in just because it's not on our agenda, but they might show up with a 48-hour deal. Because they have a problem with selling their lot on this subdivision. And apparently, when whoever made the subdivision did it, Jan and Nancy Raposa, they put the lot, what do you call it?
It's under a restrictive covenant.
It's a covenant so that they can't sell it until the road is done,
Okay.
but they sold it. And the people who bought it built a house. And now, years later, they want to sell the house, but the opposing attorney says, wait a minute, there's a covenant on this lot. And the road hasn't been built to spec. They paved it as a driveway. It's supposed to be a rural residential land. And there's been no as-built, there's been no concept, and so we have a problem that is hard to remedy tonight. I mean,
There's an engineer's report that says, well, in their opinion, is that it's adequate, but adequate access, but
well, it's adequate access, but it's not, is it an adequate road? I mean, it's supposed to be a subdivision road.
right.
We don't have a,
Was this the buyer or the seller's engineer that was hired to do this report?
yes. So that not the seller, but the owner
Yeah.
of that lot, not the not the one who did the subdivision.
Mr. Chairman, we can start the public hearing for
Okay.
6:45. Council Blake, would you like to sit at the table, or you can stay there if you want to, but.
Wherever you prefer.
I think it'd be good at the table.
I'm not gonna share my candy.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, you did?
Right place, right now.
Nadine, I need the code.
856, 856.
Okay. All right. Okay, I would like to open the public hearing for Marquardt Drive, file number 23-031C. The planning board is to consider a rescission of the 9-lot definitive subdivision plan, plat 52, lot 20A. This Marquardt Drive 9-lot subdivision was approved because, what do you call it?
So constructive approval.
It was constructively approved based on the plan of record in February of this year. And it is because the planning board department did not register with the town clerk the continuance of this beyond 120 days or 90 days. And so, if you all recall, the planning board denied the application of the 9-lot subdivision way beyond February. And it is, they appealed it, but then their attorney came and filed a constructive approval. It has been certified by our town clerk. But the applicant is been in touch with our attorney, Mr. Blake, and has proposed a way to get a 7-lot approval with 25-foot between the boundary and the subdivision road, so it wouldn't have a perimeter road, and would comply with all the other waivers that they had been asking for in February, except for the radius on the where this new road would connect to Drift Road. So, do I have that right, or is this? Yeah. So, I think the planning board has, well, let me just continue. Subsequently to our notification that we're going to have this rescission hearing, the applicants have filed with the Registry of Deeds a copy of a mortgage that they got yesterday from, I can't remember who, but what that means is that if we were to rescind, we would have to get approval from the mortgage lender as well. So we have have to decide what to do. I am inclined to really take a close look at their proposal for the 7-lot subdivision with the road off of the perimeter, which was causing a big problem. It would also comply with that I hope would comply with the stormwater implementation that they agreed to for the 8 and 9 lot subdivision plans, or the 9 lot. They had gotten that down to just one waiver. So I'd open it up to, I guess I'd ask Mr. Blake if he could further explain the legalities,
Sure, I'm happy to. Tonight we're here. Do you want me to go up to the podium?
please, because it has a,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you know, I'm Jeff Blake, your town council. So we're here for a rescission here, and as the chairman correctly pointed out, he laid out what happened. There was a constructive approval. Well, first of all, you did a denial back in July. That was appealed during the period when it's in land court right now. Counsel for the applicant reviewed the timeline and found that there was a constructive approval. He filed a request for the certification of a constructive approval. Town clerk did the math and said, yes, it was constructively approved. Also, though, under the rules and regulations, or strike that, under the subdivision control law, a planning board on its own initiative has the ability to rescind or modify, rescind, or amend an approval. So that's what this board is doing here tonight, is in the process of, or at least we're going to debate on whether or not to rescind the approval, the constructive approval. In the meantime, as you know, as part of the legal case, we have been going back and forth with counsel for the other side and for the applicant, and they have come up with a couple of different iterations. But the latest one is, as the chairman just said, is a 7-lot subdivision that I believe has only one waiver. Am I correct? The council's attorney, Attorney Silverstein, is here. But I believe the 7-lot subdivision only has one waiver, and that's the 25 radius.
That's correct.
So, just so that you know, I believe the 9-lot subdivision plan that was constructively approved has a number of waivers. So what we're in a position here where we have a constructive approval of a 9-lot subdivision plan with a number of waivers. The chairman correctly points out that the applicant has recently mortgaged the property. Under the statute 81W, there is a provision in there that says that a board's rescission would be nullified if there was a good faith lending, if you will, financing of the project. Now, of course, we would take the position that after having been notified of the rescission hearing, going out and getting lending was not good faith. But that's something that we'll have to argue about, and that's something that will be before a court and may or may not come out in the board's favor. But in any event, so we've got an approved, constructively approved 9-lot subdivision plan with, I think it was 6 waivers. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I think it was 6 waivers. They have offered tonight, and the offer's still on the table, to do a 7-lot subdivision plan, pulling this road away from the boundary, and coming up and reducing it to one waiver, and that one waiver would be right here, this radius. This is the layout, so it looks straight, but the road itself will have a 25-foot radius. The only thing it won't have a 25-foot radius is the layout. So the road will do this, it's just the layout. They won't have the ability to clear here where I think there may be an issue. So I think you got a couple of options here tonight. You can move forward with the rescission hearing and make a determination as to whether or not the plan is constructively approved, protects the health, safety, and welfare of the public, based on some of the concerns that you have, and the fact that it needs 6 waivers, so therefore it's not in compliance by definition with your subdivision control. Or you could continue this hearing to a time and date certain. If you're so inclined to talk about the 7-lot subdivision plan, we would then we'd continue this hearing to a time and date certain. I think what we would do is renotice the next hearing, together with the rescission, for a modification or amendment to the constructive approval. And at that point, we would work back and forth, the planner and I and counsel and his client would work back and forth to get a more definitive plan than you see here. And a description of the way of that one waiver, and I believe you had some stormwater issues in the other one, but we would work to straighten those out. You would hold the hearing, and then you could do your modification, rescission, and or amendment.
Thank you. So this is a public hearing. So I'm going to ask the board members for their input, then open it up to the public, and then back to the board. So, yes, John?
I've negotiated a lot of agreements. I have never in my life negotiated an agreement where everyone was happy. As a matter of fact, all the agreements I've negotiated, everyone was unhappy. I think this will be one of those. And I've read the correspondence back and forth between the lawyers. And I am not a lawyer. The way I look at this, I think you kind of summed it up, Mr. Chair, is there is a risk here, on the one hand, of our getting what we tried to avoid of the 9-lot, as I called it, spaghetti machine subdivision with the 6 waivers. That is certainly a possibility. And we tried to avoid that, but that is a reality. And there is on the table 7 lots with 1 waiver. Now, I think in the testimony we heard, especially the testimony up in the library, the most people came at it from lots of different avenues, but the most compelling testimony I heard was around safety. You know, the speed on Drift Road, and what happens when someone tries to leave that driveway. That's what really struck me. And that is somewhat related to the number of lots, but actually what I think of is that it's not so much related to the number of lots as it is a single car in the driveway trying to get onto Drift Road. That's what's the unsafe situation. It's not about 10 cars, it's about 1 car trying to get onto Drift Road, and the ability or inability of that 1 car to look around the corner at a car driving north on Drift Road at a high rate of speed. And that's what that 25-foot radius is about. That's what the location of the driveway is about, is that 1 car and the ability to see oncoming traffic. And it's just whether you multiply that times 4, 7, 9, it's a 1 car. Who's it, you know, is there a kid in the back seat? You know, that's the danger there. The design of that intersection and how visible is it? That's what I think about when I think of this issue. Can the driver see around that corner? And And so to the lawyer for the applicant and to the applicant, what I'm saying is, in my mind, that's what this is about. Can the driver in that car see around that corner? And what can you do so that that is a safe situation? And to me, that matters a hell of a lot more than whether it's 4 lots, 7 lots, 9 lots, is can that single driver see around that corner, you know, with a baby in the back seat? Or is someone driving up Drift Road at 40 miles an hour going to get the surprise of a lifetime? So I think, you know, I'm inclined to go with the negotiated settlement because I know what I'm getting. And, you know, as the lawyer has said, what's on the table is the risk of 9 lots with those 6 waivers, and I want to avoid that at all costs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. I take my colleague's point, and I would move to continue so that we have an opportunity to explore exactly that safety issue again.
I also would agree with my colleagues and agree with Bob right now to move for a continuance.
Well, I would agree with that as well. The only comment I was going to add was that the issue has been from day one, this intersection, and whether, you know, whether we achieve the 25-foot radius on the southern end of the road or not. But it's really, I think, as John described, it's not where, I think it's no longer a question of how important is that radius on the southern end. It's really the point at which these 2 roads intersect. We're just looking at a flat plan here, but when you go out there, as many of you are all very familiar with it. I've heard you say that you walk it, you ride bikes and so forth on it constantly, and you're very aware of the potential public safety issues. And the question has come up several times in relation to this, and I don't know if it's appropriate now, I know whether there's a motion here on the table, but I'd just like to hear one more time from the applicant as to the reason that it's so difficult. I mean, so why is it difficult to move this narrow neck of the property north? And I realize that's acquiring a piece of additional property. And I know that their attorney answered it in some correspondence which we have seen. So I'm not going to quote from any of that because I don't know if that's a public record or not. But so I mean, that's what, because that would in fact help this situation, is if that road could, as it exits the new subdivision, as you're heading toward Drift Road, if it could bend to the north and then enter onto Drift Road further north. I believe that might have improved the question of visibility of cars coming north on Drift Road and a car trying to exit. But I just would like to know one more time why that would be so difficult from the applicant's point of view to achieve.
Mr. Chairman, I will admit that the council had indicated that he could try to get his engineer here. I had indicated to him that I thought that might be premature because we're not really sure what's gonna happen tonight, so, I don't think we've got an engineer here. But Attorney Silverstein may be able to comment on that.
I'm happy to if you like, Mr. Chairman.
Please come up.
Thank you. For the record, Jonathan Silverstein for the applicant. So the question is, why can't we straighten out the roadway and have it come in further north and have the full fillet radius that's required under the rules and regulations? So the issue, of course, is that we don't own that land, so we would have to acquire more land from, I don't want to not be on record, can I? We'd have to acquire additional land from the abutting property owner who has not indicated she's interested in selling us additional land. There was a reason why this was as much land as we could acquire initially. That's what she was willing to sell us. If we move the road further north, if we were to straighten it out, we'd be bisecting her land, rendering the remainders on either side essentially useless. If it's just a matter of acquiring another 25 feet so that we have that radius, again, we still have to see if she's willing to sell us that land or conceivably sell us an easement so that we can add it to the layout of the road. We're happy to, pursue that again. But again, if we had been able to avoid that waiver, it would have made our lives a lot easier. I would also note, if we're able to avoid that waiver, we no longer require any waivers, and we could increase the number of lots again to recoup some of the costs that we've incurred. So, there's a trade-off with everything. I will say that field engineering explicitly told the board that the proposed roadway would provide safe and adequate access. We've done the site distance measurements. It complies with all AASHTO requirements. When you pull up to the paved surface of Drift Road, there are no obstructions. The obstructions are behind you. So the radius that is missing from the layout does not impact the safety of the roadway or whether it complies with any AASHTO requirements, as your own peer reviewer has told you.
So in your email, can I quote the email, man? Sure. So you said it would require to redesign the roadway. You're redesigning the roadway to do the 7 lots anyway, and I don't think that's done yet, right? This is just a.
Look, I think
this is just a picture, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I would like to be careful because those were, settlement communications between council, but I can tell you that this has been a process that's dragged on a long time. It's, their carrying costs, their engineering costs, their legal costs, everything to, they're now reducing the density of what we think they have by right by over 20%. 2 building lots is a significant cost with no resultant reduction in infrastructure costs. It's not like we have a shorter road. So I think we're willing to work with the board. We can look into the viability of getting additional land for that radius. But again, there's no objective or engineering evidence before the board that that's going to increase the safety of the road. We can't control the speeds on Drift Road. And the road itself is designed and will be constructed in full conformance with all of your rules and regulations. We even agreed to build a sidewalk to nowhere, which again is another pretty significant cost, to avoid having to have that, ask for that waiver. We're willing to work with you if, you know, the town wants to look to see if that vegetation that some board members have expressed concern about is within the layout of the town road, and you want us to pay to remove the tree, we'll remove the tree. Yeah, we'll do what we can, but we can't force a neighbor to sell us land, and certainly not at a reasonable price given all of the other cost implications of the process to date. So I can commit to the board that between now and the next hearing, we'll explore that. We'll, you know, I don't think redesigning the road is the primary issue with eliminating that radius. The primary issue is can we get the rights to do so.
Okay, so, anybody else? So then I'd open it up to the public. So,
For full disclosure, I'm David Lilima, and I am a retired attorney, and I live on Drift Road. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous. We had a clerical mistake that created a problem. Prior to that, you made an informed decision that one of the 6 waivers was imperative to the safety of the whole project, which would be jeopardized by allowing this project to go through. You voted on it, you said it was right. A clerical issue arises, and we have all these iterations of compromise and settlement, but it does not anyway ever change the initial reason why you rejected it in the first place. 9, 5, 6, 2, 1, when you get to the, as John has said, when you get, I live there, I live down the road not far, I know how cars drive on Drift Road. And it's faster and faster and more dangerous every day. We're negotiating that with the bridge that we're still negotiating about. And we know how much traffic is there. We know it's almost impossible to see on the winding road that we have. And with all due respect to all the changes that are proposed, nothing mitigates the existence of that problem. Nothing. All you're trying to do is make a settlement. You're still going to have a dangerous corner. So if one person dies, it'll be all on you for a compromise. That's all I mean, I understand. I'm a lawyer, I negotiate, we try to find common ways to solve problems. But this isn't, the solution here from 9 to 7 doesn't any way address the problem that started this problem. It doesn't do anything to it. It's a terrible intersection. There shouldn't be any houses there. It's a terrible intersection.
so the issue here in front of us is whether we rescind or not. So if we rescind,
You're in negotiations and litigation. I understand.
Right.
I understand. I mean, it's our town money. I understand.
Right.
Okay, but if you're going to, it's hard to understand when the safety issue is still a safety issue. The safety issue is not changing, whether you have 7, 9, or 3. It's not changing. So you're accepting the fact now from a decision you made before to
so,
now.
but I think the question is if we can negotiate a better entrance to this.
Oh, if you
property.
can negotiate, if you can accomplish a better negotiation to the intersection itself, I'm all for it. I mean, I'm not crazy about more houses down there. The traffic on Drift Road is already perilously dangerous right now, okay? And so the speed is, people are not going 35 miles an hour, they're going 40, 50 miles an hour. It's terrible there. And they're big trucks, it's just terrible, okay? We're just adding to the problem. So I'm just saying that at some point in time, something's gonna happen. And decision makers are gonna have to deal with this, that you had a chance to not let that happen. And I hope it doesn't. But I think that corner is dangerous. Just by living on that road, walking and driving and bicycling, you see how dangerous it is. And this negotiation doesn't change that. If you can get some more distance on north and mitigate it, I think it's a wonderful, to me, that's the option. That's the option to make that happen. But going from 9 to 7 that's a false sense
Well,
of.
if we can go from the risk of that intersection to a better intersection, David,
I agree with that.
that's what we're talking about.
I agree that
Okay.
that's worthy
That's
of
That's
worthy
what
of,
we're trying to do, is to achieve a better intersection.
because without that, we have a real problem.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to achieve.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm David Dorsky. I'm in a butter. This is where I live. And I want to underline the previous speaker's comments. We're here because of a clerical error. The planning board made a ruling, and I think that they should stand by it. I think that the intersection of Drift Road with the cart path as it exists is already a dangerous intersection. Let me remind you, in my previous testimony, I showed you videos that are on record of what the traffic looks like going past this entrance. And as the previous speaker said, cars travel usually at 40 miles an hour, even though it's posted 30-mile-an-hour road. I walk that path almost every day. I walk along here, and I want to know. It's not obvious from the map, but this part of the road is well below the grade of Drift Road, so that when you're coming up this path, you're going uphill. So that diminishes the visibility of a driver that is going along the road to enter Drift Road. So that's going to be a very dangerous intersection. And as the previous speaker said, whether it's 7 or 9 is not going to change it very much. Keep in mind that the town uses this area down here, which we call the town pit, and it's accessed by trucks quite frequently. And if you notice on Drift Road that there are postings north and south of this intersection with the cart path, that it's a dangerous intersection there with trucks turning into the road. So it's already marked as a dangerous intersection. So I want you to keep that in mind, that you've already decided that. And I think that you should seriously consider sticking with your decision and attempting to cure the clerical error that was made by your committee in not posting the decision in a timely fashion. Whether or not you prevail in land court is an open question, but I know that you turned down the original proposal for good reason, and you stated your reason. And I don't think that the judge in the land court is going to overrule your decision. So I believe that you have a good chance of prevailing if you stick by your decision and rescind this constructive approval, which you have the power to do now. So I don't think that you should kowtow to the applicant who is taking advantage of a clerical error that you made. Furthermore, I do believe that the strategy that the applicant took of taking out a mortgage in order to cement their, or to increase their chances of prevailing legally, I think that wasn't done in good faith. And it's obvious that they were taking advantage of the situation. And if you have a reasonable chance of prevailing, which I believe you do, then I think you should stick with it. And I think that the community would suffer tremendously if this road is built in such a way that this southerly, southeastern corner does not have a proper turning radius. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening, everyone. I own the house on the corner, 312. And a couple weeks ago, my tenant tried to get out of the driveway. Somebody came and smashed the car. My concern is just about the safety, because that road is so narrow. I drove there, fits only one car. And that's my concern about the safety, because there's not much room. Maybe we can sell some land, or maybe Barbara, because the way it is impossible. And who's gonna suffer will be the people who's gonna buy the house there and the neighbors.
Okay. Could you, for the record, give your name to?
I'm sorry, Sonia Connolly.
Sonia, what was your last name?
Connolly, C-O-N-N-O-L-L-Y.
Thank you.
And address?
312
Yep.
Drift Road.
Okay, thank you. So what you're saying is that you got hit driving out of your driveway?
My neighbor, my tenant, he's trying to get out of the driveway, and the car is passing so fast, so they smashed his car. And I imagine like that street, I drove that street, and the street is so narrow, the way he says, it is a hill. So, and it will be so narrow for the people come in and out. So if they can fix the road, but if they don't fix the road, it will be very dangerous.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Jake McWigan, 397 Drift Road. Just to follow up on that, I was actually present for that accident driving by, so I was going to bring that up. It was pretty recent, pretty bad accident actually for a Drift Road situation. But more importantly, obviously you as a board face very difficult decisions, and you faced a very difficult decision when you voted down the proposal originally. You listened to the opposition, you listened to the public. There were probably over 100 people in attendance that evening for the last hearing, and you voted it down basically 5-0. As elected officials, I think you did the right thing. You listened to your constituents, you listened to your residents there on Drift Road. I would echo, I'm sure the sentiments are still the same, whether it's 7 or 9 house lots. Originally, there were discussions to do a small 3 or 4 house lots. Again, that does not change the safety of that situation, and you can't force that, obviously, on that developer. But I would just ask that you probably stand by your original decision. It was not even a close decision, and allow this thing to play out in the court of law and see where that takes you, especially since you basically did listen to the will of the people and the people within that neighborhood. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so.
Sorry,
Mr.
just
Soderman?
real quickly, Mr. Chair, if I could. I just want to make a couple points. One is that the road that's there now is not the road that would serve the subdivision. We had originally requested a waiver from the 25-foot leveling strip approaching the intersection. We eliminated that waiver request, meaning that the geography, the vertical geometry of that road is going to change. So it's going to be safer and level approaching the intersection. It's also going to be wider. It's going to meet all of your subdivision road requirements. And I'll just note that looking at the abutting property, the driveway is completely screened from any view of oncoming traffic due to vegetation and shrubbery. That would not be the case with this subdivision road.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Mike Birney, the 24 Ames Way. I was just wondering, is there any regulation on putting a road into another road, on how much clear view you need each way? Is there any footage that, is it 10 feet that you can put a road into? We have a lot of properties like this in Westport, and we have a lot of crooked roads, we all know that. And it kind of concerns me, if this gets approved, we're gonna have more problems with the board. Everybody's gonna wanna just jump on the bandwagon. That's all.
Thank you. So to answer your question, you need either a 40-foot or a 50-foot road right-of-way that comes to the other road, plus you need, when you get to the road, you need 25-foot radius beyond that.
Well, how far do you need a straight, clear view on can you put it right on, on the curve?
I don't think that it is itemized in the regulations, but it just says there's got to be adequate sightline is what it
There's
says.
got to be some kind of formula for that.
There is.
You gotta look into that.
Okay. So I would just like to reiterate what Mr. Silverman said, is that when the road comes to Drift Road, in the previous plans anyway, they had a 25-foot level area, so you're not coming up to the road like that, you're coming at it at the same level as the road. But anyway, I think back to the board. I agree with many of the people in the audience that it still is the same problem. The question is, I think with the rescission, in my opinion, we should continue the rescission hearing until our first meeting in February. And allow the applicant to try to, as best they can, fix this sightline thing and demonstrate to us that it is safe. It isn't sufficient for our field engineer company to just give it off the cuff. It's good access. They're just giving us their opinion. They are not the planning board. And I would like to see if there's vegetation in the town right away that could be cleared, that would give you the sight line that you're looking for, as well as move the road as far to the north in the right-of-way that you own as possible, so that you can get maybe even a bigger radius on the south side to provide a better, clearer view looking south from this road. So I don't know what anybody else thinks. I don't think that we should rescind tonight, but I think we should give the applicant time to see if he can fix this problem.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if the applicant's engineer could show a little more accurate context of Drift Road. I mean, it's depicted here, just two short straight lines. I'd like to see how that road extended north and south actually looks, whether there's any curvature to it, and give us an accurate sense of the vegetation bordering the two intersections, north and south of the existing road. Just because this is not, to me, it's not an adequate depiction of some of the existing conditions, which we're all talking about having such an effect on whether this is safe or not. So I think it would just help our deliberations if we saw a little more context to the existing road, Drift Road, north and south. So the shape of the road and some of the natural features like the tree that's on that southwest corner, and any other significant vegetation that's along either side of Drift Road would also help.
Mr. Chair. I think I'm supporting the motion to continue the rescission hearing until, when was it, the February meeting?
Yeah.
To give the applicant time to define this plan. And I think what we've done in this discussion is to say that there are a whole lot of issues, in the plans that we discussed, drainage and sight lines and boundaries and everything. And we've really narrowed this down to one very specific thing. We're not talking about drainage. We're not talking about the boundary line. We're talking about how this driveway intersects Drift Road. That's it. It's a safety issue. And I understand people's view that when we made our initial ruling to deny, we should just stick with it. I get the emotions on that. But I don't agree because that opens up the possibility that what we end up with is the original 9 lots. The driveway is slammed up against that lot line, and that intersection is what we get right there. And to me, I don't want to take that risk if we can achieve a safer intersection. And I think we can. I think we can. And so, but I want the applicant to understand that that is what the focus is on. Is, as the chairman said, we want to see how you come back to us with a safer intersection. If you come back to us with this same intersection, then I would suggest hearing aids, I don't know, something, because that is what we are saying matters to us. That improving that intersection from what you were saying, and figuring out how you were going to do that. And we applaud that you have gone back and forth through our attorney in terms of modifying things, that you are trying to work this process. And we applaud that it has taken time, it has taken thought, it has taken a lot of back and forth, but that intersection still needs more work. But the stakes are, required. And that's why, February, because it's going to take some time to figure this out.
Right, and if they come up with some, even if we agree to, in concept, this, we still need to see the plan, we still need to see the engineering, we still need to see the stormwater, all those things that we need, some of which you already have, but some of which you have to develop because you've moved the road over. So I think that perhaps what we ought to do is continue this till thing, and also if you're confident, have an amendment public hearing for the subdivision that is, block the name, but constructively approved. So we would need to amend that approved, constructively approved plan. And I think we could do that on the same day, but we'd have to know now whether you want to do that so that we can notice it in sufficient time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're open to continuing to discuss a modification as a way of resolving this. I want to be really clear. We will reach out to the abutting property owners, I think one is here, if we can get the additional radius to comply with the rules and regulations. We will, on reasonable terms, we'll do it. Right now, what you see is what we own. So there was a reference someone made to moving it within our right-of-way. That is what we own. We don't have room to move anything. I suppose we could move the actual constructed road to the edge of the layout. Usually, in my experience, planning boards don't want that because then there's no room for snow storage and things like that. But, we could look into doing that. I really don't. Again, and one thing I'll commit to doing is coming back and giving the board the actual site distance measurements and some visuals so you can see that tree does not impede sight distance of a car trying to turn left onto Drift Road. It's behind the driver. And the stone wall is this high. So that also doesn't. So none of those items in any way impede sight distance. So again, I'm hearing the board, we will look into it. I want to be really clear though, there's nothing about adding a line on a paper that shows that 25-foot layout radius that's going to make the road any safer. Because there's nothing in the way. The road is where it is. If we could come in up here, we'd do it. We'd have a nice straight road, but we don't own it. And that's not what the property owner wanted to sell us. So I don't want to overpromise. I don't want the board to, if I come back and say, we can't change the intersection, I don't want the board to think that I misrepresented the state of things. We will do what we can do within what we own and what we can acquire. And I'm happy to reach out, maybe Michael and I can see if that tree is owned by the town, if it's in the town layout. If it is, we'll cut it. If the abutting property owner is willing to have us cut it, we'll cut it, if that would make the board feel safer. So, sorry for answering more than you asked, but I wanted to be really transparent with the board. But yes, we would welcome a continuance so that we can explore modification of the constructive approval.
So would you want to have the public hearing for the amendment to this constructively approved plan at the same time or later date?
I don't want to step on Mr. Blake's toes. In my view, you can have a single hearing to consider a modification, amendment, or rescission. It doesn't have to be two separate hearings. It seems to make more sense to just have one hearing and at the end of it make your decision, but I don't want to, advise the board, but I think that February, do you know the date? Would it be the 7th?
February 11th.
11th? my hope is that by that date, we'll be able to have enough information so that the board can make a decision. And we'll, you know, I think you want to have things in, is it 1 week or 2 weeks in advance?
We like 2 weeks.
2 weeks. We'll do our best. It is obviously a tough time period, but we'll, you know, work with the engineers to see what we can put together.
Okay, and you don't have to wait until then to tell us what you're doing. You could be in touch with Michael.
Oh, of course. No, we'll, you know.
So I would entertain a motion to continue the rescission hearing.
We need Bob made a motion, so we need a second.
So
Oh, you
it'll
did.
be to February 11th. It's
Right.
gotta be a time and date
Right.
certain, so it'll be February 11th at
6:15.
6:15.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Then I think if we're done with that, do we need to, we just continued, we don't need to close, so we need to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.